Did you know that I'm still a cinematographer? I've been talking about making this short film basically the last few videos, but it turns out I am. I'm still a working cinematographer, and in this video I'm going to break down a commercial I shot a few months back. Actually, it was like 16 commercials, or like different cuts and cut downs and longer forms and stuff like that. And we shot a lot of setups, but I'm only going to break down a few of those setups here because I can't go through all of them. That would just take too long. Plus I don't have behind the scenes footage for all of them. So I'm just going to go through a few setups that I liked and have good footage of, and hopefully breaking down some of those will help you out on your future projects. So this was like a PSA for kind of like an anti-vaping, smoking, mental health kind of deal for teens. And we shot it with my red Komodo. I've talked about a couple of these shots a little bit on the channel before when I was doing the review over the 35mm Zhongji T10 lens, because I use that for a lot of these shots in this commercial. But I also use my Canon FD lenses for some of the other shots, primarily the 24 f1.4. I shot these lenses clean, no pro mist or diffusion filters or anything like that. But the first few shots I wanted to talk about was this kind of fun setup that we did here in this room. Now, I didn't get to grade this project, so bear with the color. Some of these shots were just like, I threw a LUT that I used to shoot on the day on the footage when I got home that night when I was kind of looking at the dailies, but some of these are going to be straight from the actual cut, which was not colored by me. But you can see here on this shot, this is kind of a wide shot. We're on a Ronin. We're actually on the RS2 with the tilter ring, which I actually really liked. I know I don't talk about gimbals much on the channel, but using one of those one-handed gimbals with the tilter ring was really handy and worked super well with the Komodo, and I would recommend it. We had a V-mount powering it, and it would power between the handle on top and the V-mount. It would power like all day. We actually took us like halfway through the shoot to realize that we weren't just powering off the handle the whole time. I kept thinking the handle was gonna die, but really we were powering off the V-mount the whole time, and it basically just was never gonna die. It worked for many, many, many hours, and I almost bought one right after this because I liked it so much, but then, you know, me, gimbals, not really my thing, so I decided against it. But definitely something to consider if you have a smaller camera like a red Komodo. So for this first shot, we, thanks Cheyenne for doing the art direction on this. It looks amazing. All the colors look great. We've got these really cool like blue shears in front of the windows, which are adding a bunch of the vibe right out of the gate. But the problem is that the sun was facing, there was two windows in this room. The sun was on the opposite side, just blasting through for this entire setup. So we had to match that on the other window. And so we basically had to pull all the lights off the truck for this one. We pulled off an aperture 1200 and two aperture 600Ds to try to match the look of the super harsh sun coming through the other window. So you can see here, this is for the next setup for the close-up. We actually blocked out the sun on one side, but for the initial wide shot, we had the sun coming through that right window there. And then there's a silk in front of it just to kind of give some diffusion and make it look more broad. And we had, as much the punchiest versions of the heads on top of the apertures to give us the most power going through that window. And that's all we had to do for that opening shot, because we had those, the shears were already that nice color, so there's not much you had to like change there. We had a little practical on, we had a little B7C in the that little lamp here. And we also hazed this room up a bunch. We used a lot of haze on this shoot because it was about vaping in the end. So also, once we go farther into the room, in this corner here, we wanted to add a little color contrast and kind of give a vibe to the room. So we put a pink, we put a nan light tube, a Pavo tube in the corner there as a practical with like a kind of this like RGB pink shift on it. And then we left that there for the remaining of it. So when we did come in for this close up here, we actually so all of this was on the Canon FD 24mm f1.4. In order to get the shape on our face here, we didn't just lean into those windows. We put an aperture nova in the corner going through a little 4x sheet of diffusion, dialed in that color temperature the best we could using the Sidus Link app, trying to get that kind of green/white key light like we had for the opening shots. And then we just took that nan light tube that was in the corner originally and put it in front of our key light here, and put it on that magenta setting and just kind of let it rake across the grid, which, by the way, we did have this grid on the front of that 4x frame just to give it a lot of directionality. And we put that right up against his face, as close as we could get it to his face and still not see it in frame. And then, of course, we flagged it off the side here. We wanted to make sure we didn't spill too much of that key light on the background. We didn't want to flatten out the background. We just wanted that light hitting his face, because since the room was already nice and lit. Kind of funny when you're in a scenario like this and you're moving really fast. We didn't set up a tripod or anything. I just left it on the Ronin and we just set it on top of an Apple box and called that our tripod. So we just wanted that pink just to kiss his skin while still having that nice key light. I think these turned out really well with the art direction, and then mixed in with the diffusion, the vintage glass, all of that stuff with the lighting, it really turned out nice. So yeah, on the outside there, we had a full blackout on the side of the windows that were facing him originally, because that would just flatten out his face if we would have left that there. So we just basically made all that light go away, all that sunlight go away, and we left the sun on the other side to help fill up the room. And so the next shot, particularly that I wanted to talk about, was this exterior shot. We did this kind of whole setup with this kid outside skating around on a skate park. And there's like a couple times where he's kind of like sitting down, and then he's basically sitting there taking it all in. And we shot a couple of these at the right time of day. We were outside, we had a nice side light, 9 o'clock in the morning. Sun was coming from a nice direction. Not a lot we had to do there when it comes to lighting, but the schedule got pretty wonky, and eventually we had to, his close-ups, his kind of hero shots, we had to film at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is super difficult. So if we scroll through this here, you can see like that one's really easy. That's like literally just some negative fill on one side just to give him some shape, and we're just using the sun. Here is just, that's all it is just the sun. But when we came in for these tights like this, and we had to set up all these kids in the background, you can see here on the ground we have this kind of shadow, kind of acting like an awning or something that wasn't actually there. It's because it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon and the sun was coming straight down on top of us. Now, hopefully on your future shoots, you don't run into this problem with scheduling where you have to shoot at 1 o'clock. Just have lunch at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the middle of the day. Don't shoot anything. It's just not gonna look good. But on this day, we had to get so many shots. We're shooting like 60 shots a day or something. Like we needed any minute we could to get a frame, so we had to shoot it like this. But there are ways of combating this and making it look decent. It's not gonna look perfect, but you can get away with a couple things. So we'll start with this close up here. So for this, like I said, the light's overhead, which is gonna totally flatten out the image. But for this, what we did was take I believe it was an 8x, that's all we had at the time, silk frame. We went over the top. Now, when you go over the top of your subject that way, you're gonna diffuse all that harsh light that's coming in, and it's kind of resetting your lighting environment to make it already soft, right? But then you still want to add shape once you get to that point. So for this, we put that diffusion over the top, we barely just out of frame, and then we're bringing in negative fill all around on the camera side of his face to try to block off any of that light that's on the ground, any of that light's coming in from the overhead, just to give us any semblance of shape on the other side of his face, on the camera side of his face, the downside. Then once you do that, then it just starts to look a little unnatural. You still need a little bit of an edge, right? You still want to show that the sun exists. So for that, we took a little white bounce across from him just to pick up a little bit of light and push it back in. So we cut all the light over the top of his head, but then we need to bring a little bit back in. Now there's a couple ways you could have done that. If we would have had like a 12 by ultra bounce, that would have been preferred. You're just getting a nice soft wrap doing that. But since we were already using like the one proper frame that we had to improvise a little bit and just use a little piece of foam core just to get a little bit of highlight, a little bit of kick on the side of his face. And it worked out. It's not perfect, but we're at T10, everything's blurred out of focus, like no one can really tell anyways. And if I would have been able to color grade this, I could have gone through and done some power windows here and really fixed a lot of this stuff later, but like I said, I didn't have time to do that myself. So you can combat shooting in the middle of the day. Eventually an AD or a producer is going to schedule shots around 1 o'clock, and you are going to have to figure out how to pivot. And this is what I had to do to still get a decent frame. Turned out okay. Could be better, but you know what? No complaints here. But I can show you once the day kind of got a little bit better, a frame that we did end up getting. But see, you could do something like this instead. When you do actually get the time of day right, you can actually use the sun to your advantage. Now this is sort of what they call a sun sandwich, which I think a lot of people in the cinematography world might be against sun sandwiches, and some do them anyways. I try not to do a sun sandwich, and that basically all that means is that the sun is behind you, and then you're putting some sort of bounce on this side of your subject, bouncing it right back into their face, and it's kind of like there's two suns, which doesn't make any sense. And I normally try to avoid that. I try to put the bounce on the sun side, so you're getting more of just like the sun wrapping around the face. But in this scenario, he was wearing a white helmet. Because of the background we wanted and the time of day, we kind of had to do the sun sandwich. But for me, this shot was 1 second long. The bokeh looks really nice. The greenery in the background looks really nice. So I just let the sun sandwich happen. So we've got some sort of bounce in front of his face, catching the sun from the right side of the frame there, bouncing it back in, giving him a lot of shape, but we still have shadow on the side, the camera side, so, you know, looks pretty nice. And also that Zhongji T10, look at the bokeh there. That's fun for just a little $700 lens that you can throw on a Komodo or a C70 or something like that. Not too bad. This one here, we actually didn't do like anything to light this. There's sun coming in on those frosted windows behind her, and then off to the frame left, all we did was throw a nan light up above one of those mirrors, full power right at her, and then we exposed for those windows, and then we just haze the crap out of the room. And you actually get a pretty decent looking frame with shape. You know, we got these people in the background, we've got nice wardrobes, so you don't have to do as much when you have a nice art department and wardrobe department helping you out in that front. Same thing, I think going in for like, we could do like kind of this like reverse close up. You know what? No, we just threw up negative fill on one side of her face for this one and just let those windows, those frosted windows, just were lucky, and they gave us the light that we needed to get this shot. And sometimes you get a scenario like this is just kind of just perfect, and all we did here was just throw this kid right up against the window. He's basically touching the glass of the window there, and so that's acting as his key light. I think it might have been a little bit cloudy at this point, and then we just brought in a 4x floppy to get negative fill on one side, and it, like I said on those frames earlier, it's basically just touching his face. I mean, the closer you can get that negative fill in and absorb light from the outside, the more shape you're going to be able to get. So here, best case scenario, just put a person right by a window, you know? You'll see this shot 1,000 times in life. I'm just gonna blaze through a couple of these because it's fun. This one, practical's on in the background. We put a couple tube lights up just above her, just to a little bit, not so toppy, but just a couple tube lights into the ceiling there. Just kind of acting as if there was some nice overheads there. Looks really nice. T10 blurs everything else out. Can't be sad about that. I think this was a push shot, so there's actually a wide version of this. But yeah, same thing. She's got nice makeup and skin, and so just a couple of tube lights into the ceiling there is gonna add some soft light that's coming down on top of her face. Let's just do a couple more from this one. This one was fun. Same thing happened. This was the next day, and once again, what are we doing, friends? We are shooting at 1 p.m. I think this was actually 2 p.m. And I was told by the AD that I had 10 minutes to get this shot. So luckily, the video village was under one of those 9x9 or 8x8, whatever they are, pop-up tents to like add shade, because it was 105 degrees this day Fahrenheit. Actually, my camera assistant the day before got sick and had to leave from heat exhaustion. It was real hot outside. Luckily, the Red Komodo stayed afloat the whole time, never missed a beat. Thank you, Red, for putting really nice fans in your camera. But here, I had to come up with a plan really fast, so I simply just wheeled cut on the shot before this, and I was like, all right, let's go. We grabbed that tent, that little overhead pop-up that they had, and I put it over this kid laying down on the ground. And luckily, we had this baseball field behind him, and so we had some color that we could work with, so it wasn't just a white sky. So I knew once we were at T10 that would just all blur out and would be fine for a little bit of texture in the background. And then I think we tried to bring a bounce in, and we did have like a little 6x bounce here, but it wasn't really doing much outside the tent, bouncing light in. So all we did was take two 4x floppies and bring them right over camera, just to give a little bit of shape on that camera side. You know, just the same formula here, just add shape on colors, camera side, get some light coming in from the opposite side to get some shape here. So I was able to get this shot in like 10 minutes, and I actually made this shot before we had to go to lunch, before the time that the AD allowed, and I was real proud of myself on that one. But I do want to talk about one more rig while we're here. I think it made it in the commercial. What's so funny about this shot is that it was this really long gimbal shot that I was trying to get. It was a really hard move, and my legs were like shaking the whole time. And they ended up cutting the shot into 2 shots for the spot. And the whole idea was that it's this really long, cool, like one-er type shots. You're not supposed to cut. Like this would have been super easy to light if I wasn't doing a one-er, but because I was doing a one-er, it was extremely hard to light. So let me show you the shot here. Right, so we're looking into these windows over here. I'm coming over the couch. I'm wrapping around to her nails and then to her face. But in the cut, they cut it into 2. It's an okay looking shot. It's a little flat, but that's because we couldn't bring in enough negative fill because I had to walk in front of that. But what we were trying to do here is trying to get this key light to be on the far side of her while making it where I could shoot this whole wide of this room. So there wasn't a way of, this shot actually started way wider back initially, and there wasn't a way of putting a light like on a stand in the frame over here because I was seeing the entire living room initially. But so what we ended up doing was booming out an arm. Now normally you could use like a light mat or something, but we didn't have a light mat for this. So we actually boomed out an arm, a menace arm, all the way out across the entire living room. We took two 600s with spotlight mounts, those little Leco mounts, and full powered those right into a nice white bounce on the other side, effectively turning it into like a light mat or some sort of 4x3 key light in the air on the opposite side. We could have bounced into the ceiling, but then it would have spilled all over the room and not had as much power or direction. So we tried to put this as close as we could to her face while clearing the frame when I shot coming in wide behind her. So before we go, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to present your work online. If you're anything like me, you need a website to show off your work, but Squarespace makes it super easy to do a lot more than just have a portfolio. I mean, recently I was trying to sell a bunch of my camera gear, stuff that I don't use very often because I'm trying to fund my next short film, and any extra cash would go a long way right now. So I was able to just set up a garage sale on there, basically set up an entire professionally made product page, and it took me no time at all. I just grabbed some photos of the products, I threw them in there, I added shipping to it, and everything's just already built into the platform to create a store. So it made it super easy, and I've already sold almost all of the gear I've put on there. And I'm even able to send tracking numbers to the people that have purchased the products. And I was able to bypass things like eBay and Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. And I did it all myself through my website. So if you're looking to build a website right now, you can do that with Squarespace. Click the link in the description to get 10% off. And I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So if you have any questions over these setups or any of my settings or anything like that, I mean, just pretty generic settings, 2398, probably was moving ISO all over the place, had some ND filters, nothing crazy here. I actually did not use my infrared filter for this, which I now swear by, but at the time I didn't have it, and the images still turned out pretty well. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and until next time, guys, I'm Sensor Sakurai. See ya.